Hello, and welcome to the Thinking Elixir podcast, where we cover the news of the community and learn from each other. My name is Mark Erickson.
And I'm David Bernheisel.
Let's jump into the news. First up, the big news is that Phoenix LiveView 1.1 is out. This is including such things as co-located JS, portals, improved change tracking, faster tests, and a lot more. So we're going to dig into that. Also, so when we recorded last week, I was expecting Phoenix 1.8 to be also released, but it hadn't happened just yet. So it'll probably happen after we record today. So right now we're just going to be focusing on the LiveView 1.1. Currently, Phoenix 1.8 is on RC4. So any day now really is the timeline for that one.
Mm-hmm.
With this new release, they're trying something different. So we have a blog post that we're linking as well. And the changelog includes this too. It says, to update from LiveView 1.0 to 1.1, simply follow the changelog with the upgrade steps, or alternatively, run the Igniter upgrade task. And it gives two simple commands. First, you have to install the Igniter upgrade task. So it's mixarchive.install hexigniter_new. And once Igniter is installed, then you can do mxigniter upgrade Phoenix_LiveView. And that's really interesting, right? Like, we haven't seen this before. This is the first time. Honestly, I'm trying to think what version. I've got, different projects and they have different versions of LiveView. They haven't all been brought up at the same time. Some of them might be a little bit older. So I'm certainly going to be watching carefully what this does and reviewing its changes and comparing to the changelog just to, get my feet wet. Am I feeling confident with this? We'll find out. But yeah, I'm excited to try that. And then the next big feature is something that's been talked about for a while. It's co-located hooks. So really back in ElixirConf EU, Chris was talking about it. The idea is to address the friction that you have when I have my LiveView and I want to put a little bit of JavaScript with something that I have in my template. And I want to be able to just have that little bit of JavaScript. So currently, prior to co-located hooks, what you're doing is you're going and adding a hook under your app.js and maybe a separate file and loading it all in there, which totally works. And it was a fine solution, right? But what it was doing is completely separating the physical locations of where the code is going, even though the code is very much related. Like the JavaScript code is very much dependent perhaps on the structure of the template, and they're in separate places. So the idea with co-located is just to bring them all together.
One of the ways that they achieve this is that it's actually in the upgrade instructions as well, but they add a compiler to Mix. In your compilers list. You may not even have it because the default's usually good enough, but now you will add and prepend Phoenix LiveView to the list of default Mix compilers. Your deployment pipeline kind of has to keep that in consideration. It's actually scanning through now all of your components, and it's looking for these hooks, and it's going to take all of that JavaScript goodness out, stuff it into a build folder somewhere, and then have them all in one big file over there. And then you still got to bring those in, back into your JavaScript asset pipeline though. And so there's some instructions on how to set up an alias, and so they have instructions on how to do this with like the typical ESBuild mix package. But if you're rolling your own, you'll have to do a little bit of work there to get that to plug in. But I would think that that's pretty well worth it. I think the big TLDR there is really there's another location for more node modules, right? So your bundler just needs to know about it, and that's kind of it.
Yeah, so that's definitely one of those instructions you need to follow. And I assume the Igniter will check for that and try and do it for you. But it's good to know what's happening with the code base so you can troubleshoot things as stuff changes. But with this co-located hooks, so one of the interesting things is that you're doing like in the middle of your template, you have like a script tag where there's a colon type and you're giving it a Phoenix LiveView co-located hook module reference. So you're saying this script is tagged as this type of a co-located hook. And then you define your JavaScript right there, immediately following the template that it's referring to. At least that's how they're demoing it, that is immediately following it. I presume that probably makes the most sense.
This is a little confusing in their blog post, I think. So they've got the name of .sortable. That's the name of the hook. But then they're also importing another separate JavaScript library called Sortable.
True. Yeah.
and they vendored that in as well. So that's not an npm package there. They vendored that Sortable JS in, and so this is their hook to bring in that like other JavaScript library on this Phoenix component here. But those are two different Sortable names.
Yeah, that's true. But one of the things that kind of caught me off guard, I didn't quite catch this before, is this co-located JavaScript. So separate from hooks, just plain JavaScript that you can co-locate to. And the example they give in this is like maybe a nav bar, right? Where you have like a JS toggle and a dispatch that when someone toggles to display or hide the nav bar, maybe you're going to save that into local storage so it persists as like their preference. And that JavaScript behavior can be co-located. So you're seeing it in the template. This is the JavaScript code, but it's not actually using a hook. So that was the little surprise for me, because all the talk was about co-located hooks. And like, oh, this is just plain old JavaScript. I'm guessing as they were going through and doing this, they realized, we could just do this with JavaScript too. It doesn't have to be just hooks.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's pretty neat. One problem I'm going to see with this approach is that your Heeks sigils.
Yeah.
Okay, today we're doing scripts. Tomorrow we're going to do styles and CSS, right? Who knows, right? You have at least 3 languages right now at this moment in a Heeks sigil. You've got regular HTML, you've got embedded Elixir in there in curly brackets. Now you've got script tags with JavaScript in there. Somebody's going to throw TypeScript in there. I know it. And then somebody's going to do a style tag too at some point, like what do they call it, like module CSS or something, scoped CSS to just this component. So this is going to end up being a thing. I know it will be. This will be a thing. But here's the problem I'm seeing is that the Heeks sigil, a lot of editors won't know to like enable your language servers for all of those different languages and to give you that kind of like, insight. I experienced this on NeoVim at least. So like the syntax highlighting seems okay. It can be okay. I think you have to tell it to allow JavaScript. It just depends on how smart your editor is going to be. But syntax highlighting is one thing, but then LSP being enabled for it is another, to get the good info from what you're writing in there. And I don't know, man, like that's a pretty strong reason, in my opinion, right now to not do co-located JS or even hooks, because I'm going to want that. Another thing is a lot of companies are going to have things like Prettier set up or ESLint set up, right, and they're not going to go into these Heeks templates and muck around in there, So it's like this is somewhat disconnected from typical tooling systems right now. But once that is solved, man, it's going to be killer.
That's a good point, though. You have all that existing tooling that doesn't know how to look inside there. And even if they could, you wouldn't want them to muck around because they don't necessarily understand all the other stuff in there, like that the script tag has a :type attribute on it, which they may be like, what is this? ESLint would fail on that,
Yeah. And the temptation is going to be real that, this is just a Heeks template. What if I did a curly bracket and embedded some Elixir in my JavaScript here, And then I expect that to be at runtime, where it's like kind of depends on like what the assigns are at the moment, but that's not true. These are at compile time.
Oh, interesting. Breaking all the rules.
I might actually be missing something. I mean, maybe it does work in both ways and they just leave some place. So I don't know how they would do it, but I'm going to guess it doesn't work right now, but I'd be very surprised if it did in runtime with embedded Elixir in that JavaScript.
Yeah. I don't know. There's going to be a lot of learning time around that for all of us to just kind of get used to this and start using it and sharing experiences. Maybe there's going to be refinements. Maybe it's going to be awesome out of the gate. We'll find out. But the next one in the major features is keyed comprehensions. So we have some sample code where they're sharing what they're talking about with this. You would see this with streams. Streams already do this, where the stream item would include an ID, and you'd use that ID on a LI for a list item, for having a whole list of these items that you're being displayed. And you need those IDs for being able to do, with streams in particular, for being able to do intelligent inserts and updates and removals without redoing the whole list. So one of the updates with this is to use the key attribute outside of the context of streams, because streams were using the ID, but the important thing was that we have this ID. And so sometimes you have lists, maybe they're not long, maybe you have, it's 30 items, it's going to be around always 30 items or something. So you don't want it to be a stream, and you just want to display all of them. And so what this now does is this key attribute would allow LiveView to optimize diffing when you're doing a regular for comprehension over a list of things as opposed to a stream. So you're going to get some optimizations there. And in the blog post, I totally recommend you check it out. In there, they explain how there are still some limitations where like the key attribute cannot be used on slots in a component. Slot is when you have like those named slots of like : list item, and it's going to be inserted into a specific place in your template, but you're not able to do it on there for some reason at this moment.
And last part of this big update.
Okay, portals is the big one.
Oh, that's true. Yeah, not the last one. that's another big one. But maybe a somewhat minor one, but big to some folks, is that there's going to be types now in the JavaScript portions of Phoenix LiveView, and so I know that'll please a lot of folks. A lot of folks might be importing or npm installing like what is it, definitely typed /Phoenix or something along those lines, which is just a package that adds TypeScript types on top of what Phoenix.js is providing. And so instead of that now, I can't remember if it's actually definitely typed or not, but it's out there and it's the popular one. If you're using it, it. It's not official. It's not maintained by the Phoenix team, but now in LiveView 1.1, they are now shipping the type declarations as part of the package, that you get, which is nice. So that's going to be good. That's going to help your editor know when you're doing something wrong. But as Mark, as you alluded to, there is another big thing. I don't figure it's going to be as big as co-located, but I think it's going to be very helpful and probably much more ready in the terms of tooling too. But this is the portals feature. I've had to deal with this with React and in Vue before, and I'm glad to see that LiveView has something like this.
And I've got to say, when I heard, there's a lot of discussion, just kind of like, oh, portals is coming. Me not having had that experience of working with React or Vue, where they had like Vue calls it teleport, and React has like some type of portal. And not having had that background, I was like, I don't know what this is. Everyone seems to be excited about it. So I was excited to learn what actually is happening here. And I think it really, like, the usefulness of this is going to be interesting. I think it kind of comes down to how are you building your live views or live components? Because all of this is all around the idea of I'm updating a component or template here, but I want to send some markup updates to somewhere else outside of that domain of that in the template DOM of what's being represented by this item that I'm currently rendering. I'm wanting to render something somewhere else. And I'm thinking, okay, flash messages is the big one. Maybe pop-ups. I can't think of anything else.
Well, your nav bar is probably outside of the scope of usual templates, but you can also think of other big components. So think of like a big slide over or a big modal, right? So one of the techniques that I've seen a lot of folks use is they'll set up like an empty slide over and it's closed, so you don't see it. Yeah. Or they'll set up an empty modal and it's hidden, so you don't see it. And so the JavaScript part of this, like you click the button, and the button is going to say, okay, I need to open the modal. Here's the content that should be inside of the modal. Now open the modal. And because you're only going to have, hopefully, first of all, you're going to hopefully have 0 modals because that's the worst.
I love that you have that perspective. I love it.
You should have 0 modals. But if you got to have a modal, you should only have 1 modal. Stacked modals is, anyway.
I agree on stacked modals.
But if you have, you should only have one of these, because they cover the whole screen. So why have multiple? And so if you're going to have just the one, teleport that content over into that one modal. And then same with like a slide over. You're probably only going to have one slide over, like on the right side at least. You could have like a right slide over and maybe a left slide over, and those would be two different ones, and they're blank and they're hidden. But you can teleport your content over there and then tell it to show and, do the animation to transition out, versus dynamically adding all of that DOM, with big patches, which I guess you're still going to have patches, but like you won't be messing with the whole, structure of the DOM, which could be the affect browser performance. So that's kind of the idea here.
That's a good point though, about like the nav bar stuff, right? You mentioned nav bars. It's like, yes, I wanted application specific, like context aware stuff to show up in the nav bar and an application of mine. So that kind of required me to structure the entire application in a certain way. But yes, something with portals would give you a whole lot more flexibility with how you're structuring the like whole app frame of how everything is structured with the sidebars and navigation menus, and be able to put some context relevant information somewhere else on the page.
Yeah. So yeah, the usage for portals in this new release seems easy enough, really. You define your HTML, you call it a template, you give it an ID, and you give it a Phoenix portal name as well, I guess. And then in your like component, way over there down the line, you just you call the portal component, so open bracket dot portal. You feed it the target of where it needs to open up in. You put your content in there, and then I guess after that you do some Phoenix JS commands to transition it open and close, and that's kind of it. So it looks easy.
And one of the other updates that I was a little bit surprised about is this moving from Floki to lazy HTML. This is all part of that blog post still in the changelog. What was an interesting little surprise is that Dashbit has released a new little library called Lazy HTML. Just a small library based on something called Lexbor, which, as they describe it, strives to efficiently create output that should match that of modern browsers meeting industry specifications. So that means LiveView Test can now support modern CSS selectors like :is and :has as CSS selectors for validating something in your test. So if you were using Floki to do certain selections for some of your tests, that would be the only change. And they display what that type of migration would look like in the blog post.
I didn't actually know that Floki had its own little pseudo CSS selectors. So that's
I didn't either. Yeah. So if you're not using those, it should be pretty smooth.
Yeah. For what it's worth, I did have some differences in how, I don't know if it's me or lazy HTML, but some of my selectors were pretty specific, and it blew up. So things like CSS selectors that will do like a fuzzy finding and like a value or a data attribute kind of thing.
Yeah.
It's that kind of stuff. And maybe it's fixed, or maybe it was me. I don't know. Yeah, I came across the blown up test there, and whenever you got to revisit a test, it's like new eyes, right? You get to that test and you're like, why did I write it that way anyway? Like I could have just anyway. So I simplified it, and boom, that was done.
Yeah, but there's a lot there in Phoenix 1.1. I mean, honestly, some of those changes could be worthy of a 2.0 style, like, oh, this is a big update. But, that's more reserved for breaking changes, those major updates. But yeah, this looks like a big one, a big quality of life improvement in a number of small different ways, like collocated hooks, collocated JavaScript. And the key comprehensions is a performance improvement. JavaScript types for public interfaces, that's really, going to help a lot of people who are using that. And portals, I'll be really interested to see how people start using that and what that ends up doing for people.
Just another reminder, we said at the top, but collocated hooks and collocated JavaScript probably don't do it right now. And I don't mention it for all the reasons I talked about before, but it requires 1.8, Phoenix 1.8, which is at the time of this recording is not released yet. I would let that bake for just another week or two.
Or it's a personal project to try out separate from work. Don't just go migrating everything.
Yeah, because I had totally glossed over that it required Phoenix 1.8, and I got to that point, and I got a compile error saying that it required 1.8. I'm like, oh shoot. So wasn't ready to do that jump, though. I'm sure that'll be an easy enough change. But if you're super excited about Collocate hooks, let that be a branch for a while, you know.
Yep, start playing with it. Today's episode is sponsored by Paraxial.io. Every day, hackers search the internet for vulnerable applications, aiming to steal sensitive data, commit fraud, and spitefully ruin the weekend of a hardworking developer. Paraxial.io is the first and only security platform with full Elixir support that stops these attacks. Developers love the Elixir native protection, and management loves the Paraxial metrics that detail the security accomplishments of engineering, which are required for SOC 2, ISO, and HIPAA compliance. Sign up for a free trial of Paraxial.io today and mention Thinking Elixir when you schedule a demo for a special offer. Check it out today at Paraxial.io.
All right, it is that time of year where
it's that time of year
where everyone navel gazes at their language of choice. That's right. It's the Stack Overflow results, developer survey results, and it's not that different. Not that. I wish I had some bombastic things to say. There is one really cool thing that came out of that. Probably the top point for me is that Gleam is way up there. Number two on admired.
Yep.
On admired languages, which is well deserved. Like, Gleam is a very thoughtful and developer experience oriented, type safe language on the Beam. So congratulations, Beam and Beam community. You guys have done a lot of work to deserve to get there, which is really great. If I recall correctly, I think Elixir just popped down one spot from last year because of Gleam. So the top contenders are Rust and Zig and Elixir and Gleam, and that's pretty much it. The rest of them kind of pull away from the pack. Those four pull away from the pack when it comes to like admired programming, scripting, and markup languages. So very encouraging to see that Elixir still has a fond place in people's hearts and minds, right?
Yep.
Phoenix is still in the top of the list for web frameworks, and that's in the metric of admired.
Mm-hmm.
So it's still a low 4% when it comes to desired. So that's where folks would likely make the effort to go learn and adopt, right? But those that have at least heard the name Phoenix, heard the echoing in their developer halls. Phoenix, they're like, ooh, I want that. That's all they have. It's just like that. They just admire it.
They're hearing about all the cool things you can do with WebSockets and PubSub.
Yeah.
It's like, I like that. I want that, but I'm not motivated enough to change.
Yeah.
Necessarily.
Yeah. And so the two that in that breakdown, the two in that scale that kind of pull away from the pack are React and Node, right? So desired and admired. It's kind of a close range there. It's like 30% desired and only 52% admired, which is, a little over 1 out of 2, React and Node. Whereas 3 out of 4 want Phoenix, which is nice. So let's see. There are some points that Stack Overflow pulls out of their survey, and so I'll repeat some of those here because they are kind of interesting. So Cargo, the Rust package manager, is definitely up there when it comes to package management and all. And that's pretty nice, right? Cargo, it's strange to me. I don't know. It's like I think of Mix, and I think of all the things that Mix is doing, and I don't see Mix on the list here. I'm like, you're missing out. You're missing out here. Like, if y'all knew what Mix is doing, like, I think it would be pretty incredible.
I think part of it could be, if you're coming from C, like system level languages, and you're moving to Rust, Cargo gives you a package manager where C never had one.
Yeah, that's true. I guess
so. You're like, "Whoa, this is incredible!"
Yeah, they have the benefit of comparison, I guess. Speaking of package managers, another data point that they pull out there is that this is just on Stack Overflow. And so people are asking questions in Stack Overflow, right? People ask a lot of questions about Python on Stack Overflow, that's for sure. And so there's a lot of Stack Overflow answers and questions that are tagged with the tag UV. What's UV? Python has a lot of package managers. They all pretty much stink one in one way or another, except for UV. UV is pretty great. And for what it's worth, Python X, which is a Elixir package that helps bring in interoperability with Python into Elixir, uses UV to manage whatever Python stuff you got going on over there. And it is quite a delight. I've had to use UV a little bit. It's much better and much faster than a lot of the other options out there. So that was a pretty interesting data point, right? Python is definitely out there. Plenty of AI data points. Claude Sonnet is the most admired AI. A lot of folks have used OpenAI GPT models. Let's see here. Oh, here's one. Younger developers want developer content with social or interactive formats. We'll talk more about that in a minute, but but I'm not surprised. Basically, you need somebody with a pretty face on a. They don't have to be pretty. Just kidding. But they need someone with a face, a real face, talking to you over consistent social media platforms, such as YouTube or something along those lines. Social media platforms also includes long form articles, by the way. So it's just any content, any published content out there needs to have consistent presence, and that is where. I mean, it's called influencing for a reason, right? People get influenced by the content out there in order to make, adoption, decisions or something along those lines. I know if I'm looking at like three or four different packages that all kind of do the same thing, and if one package in particular has a lot of documentation, it's pretty much a done deal. Like I'm doing the one with the documentation, right? Needs a lot of that kind of support in order to get adoption.
One of the things I just want to point out is we forgot or just kind of missed the opportunity to even talk about that the survey was going on, that it had opened up.
Yeah.
Partly I'd forgotten about it because honestly, I just didn't care this year. I don't know why. But one of the interesting things was I saw a major thread of contention, I guess. The people not happy with the survey just as they were taking it because there was so much AI in it.
Yeah.
Part of what it is Stack Overflow is trying to figure out how are we going to be relevant as a business with AI. So they're trying to shift and do a lot with AI. And so part of that is probably them just doing market research too. But yeah so a lot of the stuff was about AI. So we're not really focusing on that too much.
Yeah, I'm not pulling those data points out. They do have a lot of those data points here about AI agents. Yeah, they like, for example, 66% of developers are frustrated with AI solutions. Most developers don't use AI-assisted development, but a lot of them are learning how to. So a majority of them have learned how to use it and then chosen not to. That's interesting. Not to use it. I mean, there's definitely a lot out there. You'll have to go. We'll of course leave a link in our show notes where you can go find it. I'm sure you can find it on your own. It's hard to miss this kind of stuff. But yeah, there's lots of interesting data points out there. I don't know if they're not interpreting a lot of this quite yet. That's going to be left up to the readers, I'm sure. But this does provide a lot of data behind some suspicions, maybe. Mm-hmm. And so one of those suspicions might be how is AI impacting the landscape, and how happy are you in your job? How often are you looking for, another position somewhere?
There's interesting stuff about demographics too. What does the current industry look like in terms of age and experience and everything?
There's been lots of conversations, and we won't go into it here in depth, but like some conversations about like how AI is going to impact like us as employed people, right? So like the demand for developers might drop a little bit. The demand for junior developers might drop a little bit. We're seeing like an increase in longevity of like those that are currently working in development have been in the industry for more than 10 years. good for them, right? That's not the point. The point is like, what about the ones that need to come into the industry to replace us as we become extinct?
Well, it's interesting. You talk about like if there's a large population that's aging and moving and you're not replenishing it, that's the whole baby boomer issue, right? You just have this large group that's aging and not replacing it with new qualified people at the same level in terms of quantity of people. It's going to create some interesting issues. I don't know.
Yeah. So they have a lot of data on here on the Stack Overflow survey about some of that stuff. Now, again, they're not interpreting it. That's for you to figure out, but it does kind of confirm some suspicions.
Yeah. One other thing I just wanted to pull out was regarding what we were talking about there with the Rust, Gleam, and Elixir being the most admired languages. So in terms of the actual usage numbers, they had the question about having done extensive development work over the past year with this language or tool. In that question and metric, Elixir had 2.7% of respondents saying they have done extensive work in the last year. It's not a huge portion of the total industry, right? It's quite small. And Phoenix had 2.4%. Node.js had about 48.7%. So the big majority is Node.
Is that Node or just Java? I know
was
that
Node specifically because React was also a huge thing, but that's like not a back end. It's hard because like they're comparing Phoenix to React as well, just in those results. And they're not the same thing.
There's certainly overlap, right? But I wonder how accurate some of the respondents might actually be answering when they say Node.js. Like that's actually like server side kind of stuff. That's
they had Express and other things like that, so that are truly server side.
Yeah. But the point being is that like a lot of backend folks, I say backend folks, a lot of folks that are doing things like PHP or Phoenix, right, might also be selecting Node.js, but they don't actually mean Node.js. They mean like JavaScript, because everybody typically has to write some JavaScript to also support some of their own, some of their other, backend technologies that they're also using. It's not that they're necessarily using Node.js. It's just like they just selected it because that was they were thinking JavaScript, for the browser, something like that.
And they're using npm, and that's the Node package manager. So I'm just gonna click Node. Right?
I don't know. I'm sure it's accurate enough to not matter, but I am curious how much that impacts the ratings.
Yep. But I did see, it's always a contentious topic, but they also have a little section on IDEs that people choose to use. And I saw that people were very happy with NeoVim. It was doing really well, but the big leader by far was Visual Studio Code.
Oh, right. Yeah. Yeah. So 48, nearly half of people are using it. A lesser amount, 62%, desire it. So it's not, well, I guess it's, yeah, that's second place. That's actually good. Yeah, people are enjoying Visual Studio Code.
Yeah.
And a lot of people use it. Yeah. 13% of people use NeoVim. Not surprised. But just about 75% admire it, and I can see that. It is by far NeoVim and Emacs are by far the most configurable. You can do whatever you want there, and it's amazing.
Yeah. So anyway, we're not going to go into more of the Stack Overflow results, but you definitely want to check some of those things out just to kind of see like what's going on, just kind of get a gauge of how things are looking in the industry. And maybe I should try this other editor that a lot of people seem to be interested in too.
One more thing. Sorry. One more thing. In that IDE list, I just noticed there's something called lovable.dev. Have you heard of that?
No, I have not.
Okay. I'm going to it. I see the website. This is just a chat bot that builds apps, create apps and websites by chatting with AI. So I don't, okay.
So it's a total vibe coding IDE. Yeah. So like that's your,
okay. That made the list. That's sad. I mean, it's not high on there, but
just under 2%. Yeah.
Yeah. It does show though. I mean, but that's around the same as Eclipse, which is huge, All right. Anyway, that goes to show that I think, IDEs have definitely been in a changing landscape over the past couple of years. Cursor is probably the top one in the list as far as like AI native, from the get-go. But Zed is also very new, and it's actually more desired than Cursor, but a little less used. I've definitely played with Zed. Has a wonderful Vim mode. I try to use it every once in a while. It's actually a pretty good editor.
Claude Code is in there too, even though that's not technically an IDE.
That's true. Yeah, it's more of a companion, isn't it? But yeah, definitely a changing landscape. We'll see. I do think that having some better tooling, and whether that's in existing IDEs or brand new ones, better tooling that work with AI agents is definitely going to be a boon, to help out with like getting unstuck with problems. If your editor just doesn't have that kind of stuff and you have to like jump out of it, it's just going to be more context switching. So it's nice to have that kind of stuff built into it nowadays, I think.
All right, and next up, Peter Salenka announced drops relation. When I think about that, it just sounds like a verb, like I'm dropping a table or something, but that's not what it is. Drops relation version 0.1.0. This is a new Elixir library that provides a high-level relational abstraction on top of Ecto. What they describe here, it says, PostgreSQL, the support should be quite good. SQLite works, but inference is limited due to missing type info from migrations. Got to mention there's a blog post that goes along with this, and we got a link to the GitHub repo as well. So the blog post says, Drops relation is based on 10 years of my work on the Ruby Object Mapper project and brings the most powerful features of ROM to Elixir. So really, you kind of have to see this to get an idea of some of the powerful features that are using macros, but it has a different form of composable queries and custom queries. And where the custom queries, you're using like a macro to define what ends up feeling very much like fragments, but become functions that are pipeable. To me, it kind of has a lot of that Rails active record flair and just the way it felt. But, with active record, fragment dot, as to just chaining it all out. This is still very much Elixir and Ecto and pipes, just a different feel to it.
Mm-hmm. The feel I think is because you're doing it on like your schema module instead of, I guess it's not necessarily true. So you're going to be calling like users dot active, pipe that into users dot by role, and each of these you have like an Ecto query that is doing the defining the query in here, versus something like straight up just Ecto querying where you kind of have a more verbose way of like doing all these queries. I think it's good. I think there's definitely a style here. There's definitely a good use to it. The aim to be reducing boilerplate, right? Mm-hmm. I think that's the big thing there.
Yep.
All right, next up. So, hey, we were talking about Stack Overflow and influencers, right? Well, here's one. The Primogen, YouTube dev influencer. Very funny to listen to. He's switching to Elixir. Before we get all excited, what does that really mean? So the Primogen is a good mentor out there. He does a lot of like deep dives into technologies. He does a lot of teaching. He's definitely a very visible person. I know him from the NeoVim community. He just does a lot of like NeoVim configuration, development stuff as well. And every year he goes into another language to explore, what those languages are like. And so the past year he was in, this post actually says from Rust, but I think he's actually in Go right now.
Yeah.
So I don't know if that post title is correct. It doesn't matter. He was in another language. Now he's going to be switching over to Elixir this coming year, which is going to mean that the audience that he has tuned in to him is going to get a lot more exposure to Elixir in the next year, which is great news for our community, I think.
Yeah, I just watched some of his video. It's like a YouTube live stream, and in it he was showing off some of the things that he loved about Elixir, and what that was that he was really enamored with was pattern matching, and then showing how a with statement works and opening up and saying instead this is how you would do it in Golang, where you have to handle all these different conditionals with the different error case possibilities, and just how a with statement was so much more elegant. So it's really cool to see him talking about fun, stuff like that about the language that we love. If nothing else, it's raising awareness, and people are going to be exposed to it where they might not have otherwise seen it. And next up, the folks at Software Mansion are trying something different. They've actually set up a new little website called globalelixirmeetups.com. Got a link to that. And here's how they explain what they're doing. They said, some time ago, a group of Elixir contributors had an idea: organize Elixir meetups all around the globe at the same time. So that's what they're trying to do. And they're setting aside a week, right? So from September 22nd to the 28th is kind of the range of when they're wanting to do this. And so their website has the information on either finding and joining an existing one or setting up to host one. If you're hosting it, you still have the responsibility of organizing it, arranging speakers, listing it on Meetup or wherever you're going to do it, and just promoting that it exists. But they are also offering to reimburse for pizza. So they're in that way sponsoring it to try and make it happen. And they also want to stream as many of these meetups as possible. And they're committing to say that they're providing infrastructure for that. They're saying, hey, if you can just do a couple of these different easy setups for camera or something, then we can help make it be streamed. So that's really cool, because lots of times you might we want to do meetups, but we don't have the ability to do any like live streaming of it, because that's a whole nother separate set of skills that you have to develop.
That's pretty cool coming from Software Mansion. Software Mansion has also done a lot of like Elixir WebRTC tech.
Mm-hmm. True.
They're also the ones that do Popcorn, which is Elixir in WASM, which means your browser can run Elixir, which is pretty cool. They have also done Live Debugger, Membrane, which is the multimedia processing kind of framework. So they've just done a lot of stuff. Yeah, FishJam is their low latency live streaming and video conferencing API. So I wonder if that's what they're... so they have a good interest in this too. So they're definitely the right partners in this.
It's very cool. I think it's a fun idea. So as of this recording, there are 0 meetups listed in the US. And I know that there are a number of regular US Elixir meetups that could be listed there. So this is just an opportunity for you to expose your meetup to other Elixir enthusiasts, right? As of this recording, there are 7 meetups listed, ranging from places all over the world: South America, Mexico, and multiples in Europe. So I think it's a fun idea. I think it's a great way to get exposure for your meetup that you might already be doing. You just have to do it sometime in that week, the 22nd of September to the 28th. And if you're looking for a meetup, go over there and check it out and see if you can discover something fun that you can either, attend and review remotely, or find and go and visit in person.
All right, last up for today. ElixirConf US 2025 is right around the corner. I think by the time this episode drops, it'll be in about 2-ish weeks. And this is happening in Orlando, Florida. Last year in Orlando, Florida, I think, right? They had to fill out their contract. That's why they're still there. But hey, Super Nintendo World is right there. So there's a good part, right? I'm trying. All right. So if you haven't gotten your tickets yet, you can use the Thinking Elixir discount code for 10% off of the ticket price. And we've got a link to that as well. I'm going to say it. It's not going to matter because it's going to be expired. But at the time of this recording, they actually have a flash sale right now, which is probably better than the discount code. If you're listening to this somehow while it's still happening, you should definitely grab that. And for those that are in the present time, sorry you missed it. But the Thinking Elixir discount code, 10% off, might still be good for you. You can find out more at elixirconf.com. They've got the whole agenda posted there, all the speakers posted, 3-track conference. So there's lots to choose from.
Yep. Lots of great stuff. But unfortunately, that's all the time we have for today. Thank you for listening. We hope you'll join us next time on Thinking Elixir.